Hey guys, this is Mar with the Grand Mug. So today we're going to be doing a little experiment and actually trying to wash some coffee before we roast it. I'm just measuring out about 10 ounces of each coffee here. So we'll be doing a little comparative roasting and cupping basically. These are both the Ethiopian natural process, Amhara Ayehu. Shout out to Happy Mug. Those guys are awesome over there. Go check them out if you haven't. Just to give you a little background on why I am doing this. Well, basically, I watched a video about a week ago, and there was this Ethiopian lady in her home doing, a pan roast of some coffee. And before she roasted, she actually washed the beans for a considerable amount of time, about 10 minutes. And for whatever reason, she claimed it to be pretty essential to getting quality coffee. So that's what I'm going to try to do here. I'll go ahead and link that video below, so check that out too if you like. When I first saw this, I was pretty appalled. I'd never seen anyone do that. It seemed kind of crazy to me. But when I started researching this, I really found not a whole lot of information at all. So I basically just figured I had to try it myself before I could rule it out. Just kind of really trying to get into the beans here, scrub them around, and you'll see it like I'm really getting in there, and actually some of the silver skin starts to come off. Yeah, you can see the silver skin coming off right there. So I washed the coffee for a good 10 minutes. Now I'm just gonna try drying it off. So that's what it looked like after washing. Now I'm just putting it on some paper towels. I'm gonna sort of dab it off. Try my best to get them dried out again so they're not sopping wet when I throw them in the roaster. So now I'm taking them and I'm just putting them over a pan over some really low heat just to dry them out. I'm not roasting them here at all. I just want to evaporate some of that water again. Alright, so you can see this is the unwashed coffee right here. And here's the washed coffee. You can see it's smoothed over a little bit, and most of the silver skin has actually come off already. So now onto the roasting. I'm not really going to focus on roasting in this video. If you want to see kind of my process for that, I have a couple other videos on that, so go ahead and check those out. I'm going to be roasting this coffee, just trying to get a nice sort of light roast, and then using that curve, I'll actually try to roast the washed coffee along the same curve. That way it's even. We can do kind of a apples to apples comparison. Here's what that coffee looked like, pretty typical for a natural coffee. And then take a look at the chaff here, just keep note of that. You can see there's quite a lot of it, and sort of varied in color. Okay, now on to the washed coffee. To my eye, this coffee seems a little bit lighter. It might not be coming through on video, but you can definitely notice that the chaff is much less and much more even and light in color. Much more like a washed processed coffee, actually. Here's a little comparison of the roast curves. We got the washed coffee up front, and you can see it did roast a little differently. It was a little slower, but I got them up to the same drop temperature, and they both had very similar development time ratios, around 12%. So these should be pretty comparable roasts. So now we'll take a little bit more of an in-depth look at the roast themselves. This is the unwashed coffee. You can see it looks pretty typical for a natural, some mottled coloring, a little bit of scorching, but overall pretty good. Now bear in mind this is under fluorescent light, so it's going to look a little bit more kind of funky than it does in person. Now moving on to the washed coffee, you can see the beans, despite having really similar development time and also being released at the same temperature, they are actually lighter in appearance. Now they do have a little bit more of the speckled appearance to them, but that's pretty typical for what I've seen from some washed coffee, some light coffees, so nothing to be too concerned about there. Overall, I would say they actually appeared to roast more evenly. Alright, it's the next morning. It's been about 18 hours since roast, and it's time to cup the coffees. This is going to be the best way to test the coffees against each other and see how they compare. So, I'm just weighing out 10 grams of each coffee here. If you haven't heard of cupping before, it's probably the most popular way that roasters like to taste coffees against each other, namely because it's very repeatable and very easy to brew amongst a lot of different coffees. There's very few variables involved. Essentially, it's just ground coffee and water poured over top of that. So that's why I'm using that today, just to eliminate as many variables as possible and keep everything consistent. Now I'm testing for the dry aroma. On the unwashed coffee, I'm getting some cherry, some marzipan, cocoa. On the washed coffee, I'm also getting that cherry and chocolate, but a little bit more subdued with a little bit of a toasty smell. Alright, using 200-degree water, I'm going to go ahead and fill up each cup to 160 grams. You can see the coffee kind of floats to the top. It develops this crust. And then ultimately what's going to happen is I'll take those spoons, and as you can see here, I'll use the back of the spoon to sink the crust, and at the same time I want to get a feel for how the coffee smells. And on the washed coffee, I'm getting kind of more of a cocoa, dry fruit, and more of a caramel smell on the unwashed. So I'm just kind of scooping up any excess foam here, and then I'll go ahead and start tasting the coffee. Keep in mind, this isn't really a blind cupping, so I'm just using this as a rough comparison here. Tasting the washed coffee, I'm getting really nice, clean, delicate floral, red apple. It tastes to me more like a washed processed coffee. It's really crazy. And on the unwashed coffee, I'm getting definitely bigger flavors, more of blueberry, a little bit less clean though, and a slight sort of papery aftertaste. I'm just gonna start marking down some of my observations here. Alright, so just to be extra fair, I had my girlfriend come and set up a blind cupping. So here I didn't know which coffee was which, but did this just to eliminate any bias that I might have had. Ultimately, I'm going to go through the same steps here, testing for the same things, and my findings were basically the same. So the washed coffee was much more clean and delicate, and the unwashed coffee had bigger flavors, but generally a little bit less clean with that slightly papery aftertaste. The washed coffee also stayed cleaner and sweeter as it cooled. Going into some of my final thoughts, I think this little experiment turned out way better than expected. While you may have to adjust your roasting approach slightly to accommodate for the added moisture, washing the coffee definitely seemed to improve its cupping score all around. Seeing as I used a natural or dry process coffee in this experiment, I'm really not sure how well this would work on a honey or wash process coffee, but I assume it'd be similar. Overall, I recommend people give this a shot if you've got some extra coffee laying around, and definitely let me know your thoughts. Is this something that you've heard of before? Feel free to let me know what you think in the comments. Anyway, that's all for now guys, so thanks for watching, and remember to stay safe and keep it fresh.